Hey guys, what's going on? James here, and in this video today, we're going to be talking about all the matchups that you guys need to keep an eye on for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers Week 4 matchup versus the Los Angeles Chargers. I still have to get used to calling them the Los Angeles Chargers. They should have never moved out of San Diego. But let's get started with the first matchup that I want to talk about, which is going to be Keenan Allen versus Carlton Davis. I would mention Mike Williams, but he is dealing with some type of injury. I don't know if he's going to be 100% or even play in this game versus the Bucs, but I do want to mention Keenan Allen because it seems like he is pretty much ready to go, and I would imagine that Carlton Davis will be matching up with him a lot. And I would argue that Keenan Allen is going to be the toughest test so far for Carlton Davis, and I will talk about that in a second. But for everybody who hasn't been paying attention, Carlton Davis has had a very phenomenal start to his season with the Bucs. He held Michael Thomas to 3 catches, 17 yards. He had a pretty decent game versus the Carolina Panthers, and then finally versus the Denver Broncos. Yes, he did give up a touchdown to Tim Patrick, but overall, besides that one play, he did a very good job. And I know people are going to point to the pass interference calls, and yes, those can be some problems sometimes. I would argue that in 2020 and the past couple of years, refs have been calling pass interference calls on pretty much everybody, so I take all of those with really a grain of salt. At the end of the day, nobody really knows what is and isn't a pass interference call these days anyway. But overall, yes, Carlton Davis can be a little bit more physical than your average cornerback, but it fits Todd Bowles' defense perfectly. He's still my hashtag #1 cornerback, but like I said, Keenan Allen might be his toughest matchup yet to this point of the season. And I know people are going to say, but Michael Thomas is one of the best wide receivers in the league. Yes, he is. He has phenomenal catching ability. He has phenomenal size and just really good wide receiver, okay? One of the best in the game. I would argue that Keenan Allen is a more balanced wide receiver than Michael Thomas. Keenan Allen is one of the best route runners in the entire NFL, and Michael Thomas is definitely up there as well, but Keenan Allen is insane with his route running. Again, I'll say it again, he might be one of the best route running wide receivers in the NFL right now, if not the best, okay? So I'm going to be very interested to see this matchup between Keenan Allen and Carlton Davis. How is this going to work? Because I would say that Keenan Allen and Michael Thomas aren't that far apart in terms of overall ability, and Carlton Davis held Michael Thomas to 3 catches and 17 yards. So this should be a very, very fun matchup to keep an eye on for this upcoming game versus the Chargers. The next matchup I'm going to have an eye on is going to be Joey Bosa versus Donovan Smith. I can't believe that this might actually happen. I'm not 100% sure. If I was the Chargers, I would definitely put Joey Bosa on Donovan Smith ASAP. I would already be game planning around that. Joey Bosa is one of the best pass rushers in the entire NFL. Him and his brother Nick Bosa are absolutely insane. In my opinion, people have kind of forgot about Joey Bosa the past year or two. He really is one of the best pass rushers in the NFL, and if he's going up against Donovan Smith, man, I don't know what's going to happen. And I'm not saying that because I think Donovan Smith's going to do a terrible job, but I will say that a lot of people in Week 1 were really bashing Donovan Smith. In my opinion, it was justified. He did not have a good Week 1. He bounced back in Week 2 versus Stephen Weatherly, I believe was the defensive end at the time for the Carolina Panthers. But again, in Week 1, he got absolutely beaten bad by Trey Hendrickson and Carl Granderson. Then in Week 3, it seemed like he did struggle yet again, going up against guys like Bradley Chubb and things like that, which I thought if that did happen, Bradley Chubb's a very good pass rusher, I could see Donovan Smith struggling, but now he's going up against Joey Bosa, who I put right up there with Cam Jordan as one of the best pass rushers in the NFL right now, and Donovan Smith didn't even have to go up against Cameron Jordan in that game versus the Saints, so I'm a little concerned with how this might go with Joey Bosa versus Donovan Smith if it does happen. If it's Joey Bosa versus Tristan Wirfs, I'm still going to be kind of worried, but I wouldn't be as worried if it is Joey Bosa versus Donovan Smith. So definitely pay attention to that. The next matchup that I'm going to be keeping an eye on is Chris Harris Jr. and Casey Hayward Jr. versus Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. I'm going to say that this is the best cornerback duo that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers have faced all season up to this point, especially when comparing, the Denver Broncos. They do have a couple of nice cornerbacks there. They had A.J. Boye, who didn't even play in week 3, so he doesn't count, but they still have a couple of nice corners there. The Panthers, not really. They have a lot of young guys. Dante Jackson could be interesting, but who knows. And then the Saints have Marshawn Lattimore, who is a very good cornerback, but they have Janoris Jenkins, who I think is a pretty big drop-off in overall talent when compared to Marshawn Lattimore. Chris Harris Jr. and Casey Hayward Jr., I think, are both comparable to the skills of Marshawn Lattimore. They're both 31 years old. They're both very, very good at what they do. Man coverage, zone coverage, even playing in nickel if they need to. They can do it all. So going up against arguably one of the best wide receiver duos in the NFL in Mike Evans and Chris Godwin should be a lot of fun to see. Mike Evans, his overall stat numbers right now don't necessarily look phenomenal in terms of yardage. He only has, I believe, 108 yards through 3 games, but he had a touchdown in week 1 versus the Saints. He had 2 touchdowns in week 3 versus the Broncos, and I believe he had a touchdown in week 2 versus the Panthers. He did. So his touchdown numbers are looking great. Yardage numbers need to get up a little bit more. But hey, if he's scoring touchdowns at the end of the day, it's not crazy. I just want to see him get that 1,000-yard mark. Chris Godwin has been doing very solid Chris Godwin things. In week 1, he was very solid. In week 2, he did miss it due to that concussion he had suffered. And in week 3, he got right back on track. So this could arguably be the most important matchup of the game, because if Casey Hayward Jr. and Chris Harris Jr. are able to contain Chris Godwin and Mike Evans to a pretty decent degree, we could begin to see some problems in the passing game. The Buccaneers still do have a lot of talent there. Tom Brady throws to the running backs a lot. He just started throwing to Rob Gronkowski a little bit more. O.J. Howard had a phenomenal catch versus the Broncos, but obviously you're going to be making a lot of great plays with Mike Evans and Chris Godwin throwing them the football. So if they are somewhat eliminated from this game versus the Chargers, I could see the Bucs struggling a little bit to move the football. The second to last matchup that I want to keep an eye on, guys, is a little bit of a big one. It's going to be Austin Eckler, Hunter Henry, and Josh Kelly versus the Bucs front 7. Just the entire front 7, because I'm pretty much tired of singling out guys on the front 7 when it's pretty much just their entire unit there. So Austin Eckler is a really interesting running back, an undrafted guy, really didn't do much his first year and a half in the league. Melvin Gordon went down with an injury. Austin Eckler came along and was awesome. He reminds me a lot of Phillip Lindsay, but I think he's better than Phillip Lindsay. He's a good runner, and he's a very good receiving back. He is basically just like a slot wide receiver out there on the field. It's actually very impressive to see. He's got a ton of speed, a ton of agility, and just a ton of overall good skills as a receiver and as a running back. So I'm going to be very interested to see how the Bucs front 7 deals with this. They contained pretty much everybody they've gone up against so far up to this point. Christian McCaffrey, Melvin Gordon, also Alvin Kamara. They've been able to contain all of them. So I'm going to be very intrigued to see how they deal with Austin Eckler. It should be a very fun matchup, and I think the Bucs front 7 can handle it. Hunter Henry, in my opinion, is one of the better tight ends in the entire NFL right now. He is very physical, very fast, and very good, especially in the red zone. So look for the Buccaneers linebackers to deal with that one. And then finally, Josh Kelly, who was a rookie who just got drafted by the Chargers. He's got a lot of power to his game, and he complements Austin Eckler beautifully. So I can't wait to see Josh Kelly versus Vita Vea, Ndamukong Suh, and William Golston, because that's going to be a lot of beef and a lot of power going up and slamming into each other. So that one should be a very fun matchup. But really, containing those 3 guys, I think, can do wonders in terms of really hampering this Chargers offense. They have a lot of pieces on both sides of the football, this Chargers team does. I really feel like they're an underrated team in my opinion, but it's going to be really interesting to see what these guys do. Austin Eckler, I think, is the most dangerous guy out of these 3 guys I just mentioned. I really do have a lot of respect for him. I think he's very underrated, and I think he's very good. So him versus Levante David, Devin White is gonna be an absolute treat to watch. So I can't wait for that. But guys, the last matchup that I want to talk about here before we go ahead and sign off is actually just a fun one. It's Tom Brady versus Justin Herbert. Now, Tom Brady has been gelling the past 2 weeks with this offense. He's building more of a rapport with both Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, especially Mike Evans in the red zone. They've been pretty darn good. And I think as the timing gets more in sync, especially with Mike Evans, we could see things just begin to explode. I think Mike Evans still has a chance to hit 1,000 yards on the year, but he's really going to have to pick up the pace. He's 3 games in. He only has 108 yards, something along those lines. He's got to get going. The touchdowns are there, and we do love to see that, but I want to see more yardage from Mike Evans. He is getting double teamed a lot, though. Chris Godwin, obviously, with the chemistry getting built with that's going to be absolutely phenomenal. And Tom Brady just seems to get more and more comfortable as the weeks go on. In week 1, he was not that comfortable. In week 2, he was a little bit more comfortable, but there still was a timing issue here or there. And in week 3, he looked pretty darn comfortable, in my opinion. He didn't miss a lot of throws. He had, I believe, over a 60% completion percentage, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions, very solid game from Brady. And I know people do criticize and say, well, it was the Broncos. They suck. They have a lot of injuries. Yes, they do, but I still thought the Broncos defense was still a pretty capable defense, and I'm going to be very intrigued now to see how Tom Brady does versus this Chargers defense. On the other side of the football, you have Justin Herbert, who came in for an injured Tyrod Taylor, who had his lung punctured by a team doctor when he was getting a painkiller shot for a rib injury. That sucks. That really sucks for Tyrod Taylor. I hope he gets healthy soon. I would not want to be in his situation. That's incredibly frustrating. But the 5th overall pick in this most recent draft, Justin Herbert, came in, and in his first game, I thought he played very good filling in for Tyrod Taylor on such a short notice. I like Justin Herbert. I think that he is a very capable, very interesting, bright young quarterback. The second game where he played the Carolina Panthers, he did struggle a little bit, but I thought he still looked pretty decent overall. Now he's going to be playing the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, whose defense really isn't a joke. They are playing some pretty darn good football. They looked good against the Saints. They looked very good against the Panthers, except for that very end of the 4th quarter, and they looked great versus the Broncos. So I'm going to be very interested to see how Justin Herbert does versus this very good Buccaneers defense right now. Again, there's that stigma of, well, when the Bucs play a backup quarterback or when the Bucs play a rookie quarterback, it's always a career game for them. Hey, that stigma was broken last week, at least half of it, versus Jeff Driscoll and Brett Ripien. They got absolutely crushed by the Bucs defense. So now maybe we can break the second half of that stigma against Justin Herbert. But I do kind of like the idea of having the old guard versus the new guard. You know, the GOAT, the greatest of all time in Tom Brady versus a very young and upcoming quarterback in Justin Herbert. That should just be fun to watch, and just seeing those two interact after the game is just going to be a cool moment for me to see. So yeah, guys, that's going to be it for all of the matchups to pay attention to in week 4 versus the Chargers. What do you guys think? Let me know about all the matchups that I mentioned, as well as other matchups that you guys are going to be paying attention to. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. Hope you all enjoyed. I will see you in the next video or the next live stream, but until then, and as always, guys, goodbye for now, and go Bucs.